Thanks, Melissa. You guys want to come get a seat, get comfortable here? Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Adam Moore. I'm the EEO and Diversity Director for SAG-AFTRA. And for the last decade or so, I've done my best to understand all the insane things that you all go through as performers, so that your union can protect the rights that you have and advocate for the necessary changes that you need. And I want to thank the SAG Foundation for inviting me to facilitate what I know will be a thrilling and enlightening evening for us all. And for those of you out in the internet, hello, and you're not going to be able to participate in this part, but just so our panelists get a sense of who's in the room, by show of hands, how many SAG-AFTRA members are here tonight? Okay, and how many of those are doing stunt work or would like to get into stunt work, so we get a sense? Okay, and the future union members of the world, new school students, we have new school students, and equity members. Fantastic, okay. I think that gives us a sense of who we're talking to, at least not on the interwebs. And as you heard, you can, in addition to bringing up note cards or handing in note cards, you can tweet questions to hashtag SAGF or SAGF. In light of the recent tragic death of Sarah Jones in Georgia on the set of Midnight Rider, the goal of the panel is to inform you of what your rights are regarding safety and empower you to feel confident in speaking up if your safety is being threatened. In other words, what are my rights? When should I be on the lookout for stuff? What should I be on the lookout for? What are those things that should set my spidey sense off? And when should I say something? And when I want to say something, who do I talk to? The SAG Foundation has assembled an incredible group of folks here tonight who will be able to provide candid and reality-based answers to those questions and share years of insight so that an area which has changed over time and is often misunderstood can be unpacked and untangled and understood by the time we're done here tonight. So we're going to go right down the line, and I'm going to let this illustrious group introduce themselves.
I'm Monona Russell, and I'm the safety representative for USA 829 IATSE and for the New York production locals. I'm a chemist and industrial hygienist.
My name is John Ford. I'm the president of Motion Picture Studio Mechanics, Local 52. Cover 5 states, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. We also we represent most of the below-the-line crafts, grip, electric property, sound, and whatnot.
My name is Jim Damus. I'm Director of National Field Services with SAG-AFTRA. We have a staff of 7 field reps who monitor and enforce the contracts on the sets.
We're getting a little impromptu direction
Okay.
here. We're going to go through what you guys go through.
Sorry about that.
Another microphone. We're good.
And I am currently embarked on a national program training our locals around the country in on-set representation to increase our set presence nationally.
I'm Tim Gallen. I'm a stunt performer and stunt coordinator, presently coordinating the TV show The Following on Fox. Been working in the New York area for the past 35 years. Thank you.
Yeah, that's worth a round of applause for all these folks. That's right. Just to give you a sense of how we're going to go through this conversation, the idea would be to talk about the things that you can do as you prepare for the job, the things that you can know, the things you can find out, the information that's available to you, the things you should prepare before you even show up for a day of work. Then the majority of the conversation will be all those things that happen when you actually are on the job, and then those things that may come up afterwards, whether it's a result of your job or something that you don't think of until afterwards, or you want to speak up after the fact. So we'll kind of take you through your process. And we're going to talk a lot about what the contracts say, what laws say, what the rules are, essentially what's supposed to happen. But these folks have an incredible amount of experience for what actually happens, right? How does that actually translate into the real world? Contract says this is what plays out real time in the real world. How are you supposed to deal with it? So we're going to try to, in an attempt, one, not to bore everybody to death by just reciting contract language, actually make it applicable so you know what to do when you're working. So we'll start off with the stuff that happens before work and the things that you might want to think about before you go to set or as you're looking to take that job or in the audition room. So you have the opportunity to get on set, go to work, and there's certain kinds of information that you might want to know about. There are safety bulletins, I understand, that people can take advantage of. Who does these safety bulletins, and where can people find those things?
Well, the AMPTP, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, has a set of them, and you can access those online. There's also a group called PLASA, P-L-A-S-A, and they are setting all kinds of standards for performance, for equipment, for electricians, for lighting, for a great deal, rigging, those kinds of things. So there's many places, but basically the schools should have provided you already some of this basic information on what your rights are. Most people should not come out of school thinking that OSHA is a small town in Wisconsin. They should understand that there are laws and regulations that apply just as much on a set as they do in a factory or an office building. And when you know those rights, that will give you a good head up on what you should expect when you get on the job, any job.
And just in case, OSHA, Jim, is? Oh, Monona, please.
Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
There you go. Just in case.
Just so you know, the safety bulletins are put together by a safety committee of labor management representatives who are active in health and safety concerns in the industry. And they should be out on call sheets. They're sent to performers as well as crew members. And if you're on a set and one of these issues are in play, you should always look for the safety bulletin, or if not, have it in hand when you arrive at set, on set.
No, please, John.
Also, I think your best bet, if you can do it, is access them online, because it's not like you go on a set or a location or a stage and there's a table with them all sitting there. Okay? If you ask for it, they'll provide it, but they'll, you know, often, well, it's up in the production office, or it's here, it's there. You're better off at the end of the day downloading these things yourself if you're really interested in it. I wouldn't rely on the employers to just have it there. They should, but they don't.
What kinds of things can people expect to see on this? When they're looking at this, what are they looking for, or what are the kinds of things that they should keep an eye out for, the typical sorts of things that you might see on one of these bulletins that people should take a look for?
Well, their recommendations, their guidelines of what's proper, what's an acceptable standard. For example, smoke and fogs. They stipulate there what is acceptable and what is not, and therefore we go to the material safety data sheets, the MSDSs, and we go to people like Monona to interpret. Often it's clear. If they're mineral-based, this is not an acceptable fluid in these products, but sometimes we need more careful scrutiny, and we rely on the industrial hygienists, such as Monona.
So you mentioned the material data safety sheet. So, and Monona, if you want to pick this up, so the kinds of things that people will see there is what?
Junk. They're terrible. The material safety data sheets, especially in the United States, are very uninformative. That's why there's a brand new law. And OSHA had to pass it, because if we don't pass this law, we can't export to other countries that have all passed this law after 2015. So they are now, you finally learn there are material safety data sheets. Now you got to unlearn it, because they're going to be safety data sheets. And they're globally harmonized so that they'll be understood all over the world, not just here. And they have more information and better information, hopefully. So those are a good source of information for any kind of fog, pyro, any kind of paints that are on the set, anything like that. But interpreting them is tricky. That's why we train in our union. For example, you might see on a material safety data sheet or one of the new safety data sheets that a chemical is not considered a carcinogen by IARC, which is the International Agency for Research in Cancer, NTP, the National Toxicology Program, or OSHA. What does that really mean? It's never been studied for cancer. Because if it was studied, it would be listed in category 4 if it was not a carcinogen. So all kinds of things you have to learn. No one is going to tell you this. So I think it's up to the unions to do some of the training so that we read this properly and understand. Those sheets come from the manufacturer who is selling the product. Well, duh. So it's important that we really understand what they're saying.
And, you know, I echo your calling them junk, because often they say trade secret, and it's supposed to have all the ingredients on there. Trade secret, I mean, so what do you do? It is a requirement in SAG-AFTRA contracts that they give us the MSDSs upon request, but hopefully there'll be something that comes along that's better equipped for us to deal with, as Monona indicates.
So somebody has a question. If somebody is looking at this stuff and says, you know, I don't know about this, where do they go? What do they do? I mean, Nona talked about, you know, we're all here today to learn about these things, but if I'm about to go to work and I see something on one of these sheets and something looks a little shady to me and it says trade secret or says something on there that looks to me like that doesn't mean anything to me, how do I go about finding out whether or not it's okay for me to go to work or whether or not I should request a test or all those things? What do I do before I go to work if I see one of these things?
Well, I think the first thing you should do, you know, obviously, is call a union, call anyone, if you know any one of them, and we can get copies of it and we can start the ball rolling. Don't forget, you're on the set, right? You're expected to go to work, right? You can't just say, well, I don't know what this means, so I'm not going to work, and we're not going to shoot until somebody. We'll get that work done for you at the time, and hopefully this comes up. And a big part of the problem is, you know, as performers, most of you're the last ones on the set, right? The scenic artists, my people, construction guys, and we've been there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month and a half. All the chemicals, all the paints, everything's all been done. You're walking in at the end of it. So, but on location, that's a different story. Anytime we go into a place, we always instruct our members, if there's something wrong, if you think something's wrong, everybody's got a cell phone now. Just go around the corner, drop the dime, and then go back to work, and we'll send somebody up to investigate. But it's, you know, you can get sick in a hurry in some of these places, so you should never be afraid to make the call.
What you bring up a good point. I think it's something that we'll hit throughout the evening. Is that if you see something, say something. If it drop the dime, pick up your phone, text, go back to the holding, or do what you got to do. Get a hold of somebody at the union and understand that we're interested in making sure that we get to the bottom of what's going on, and we don't jeopardize your ability to work in the future while we're doing it. So we're not interested. I'm sure we'll get the question. So who called you, and where did this come from, and how did this go down? We don't play that game. That's not the point. We're not here to out folks in terms of somebody who's dropping the. Make sure we're protecting folks not only when they're on set but also in your future job opportunities. So feel confident that when you talk to your union, you're just talking to your union. There are certain things that people should be aware of, so that maybe there's smoke, maybe there's some chemical rain or snow that people are going to be using, but it's been used before, and so long as certain standards are followed, proper ventilation, other kinds of things. So it may well be that if somebody sees something, that they give a call, the call comes back to them, says, it's all okay, right? I mean, it may be that, just because your spidey sense goes off doesn't mean that it's not something that we weren't aware of, because hopefully we're all having pre-production meetings and they're being more honest than not about what it is that they're looking to do. So it does happen that people will call and we say, actually, we've known about this and this is fine to go to work.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of false alarms. And we gladly vet these calls when they come in. One of the things that we always look for are pre-production meetings with the producers prior to principal photography. There's no requirement in our contract for that, but often, particularly the New York production teams will want to do that. So we clear the air, we go over their concerns, our concerns, so everything is done according to our contracts in a safe manner. And we always ask for any MSDSs on chemicals such as smoke, fog, artificial snow, and having that stuff in advance to vet. When there are trade secrets listed, then we have a decision to make, and it's not on set. We always say we don't want the drama on the set. You know, send those in advance. So wherever we can, we do that, but we can't always do it.
No, I think it's a good point. I mean, nobody wants surprises at work, right? Everybody, you're supposed to know what you're going to work to do, what the job is going to require. Same thing from the employers. They want to know you have the skill set you said you have. You look the way you said you did in your picture or whatever it may be. No surprises on either end. And if that comes up, unfortunately it happens, you know, you got to let somebody know and let the union know. Before we get into working on the job itself, there's something that members should also think about to make sure that they themselves are prepared should something happen. So before you get there, again, this idea of no surprises is be prepared. And so to make sure that you have, you know, a list of medications you may take, take care of yourself as a human being, and recognizing that while you have a whole union behind you, and you have other unions and other employees there with your same interest in mind, at the end of the day, you got to make sure you take care of yourself. And so make sure that you have with you everything that you may need and somebody else may need if should something happen, that you can be attended to appropriately. So when you get to work, and I think we'll just go through some things that people encounter. We've talked a bit about some of the chemical things, but more of some of the activities or other folks that they may see on set. We'll just maybe go down and maybe start with Tim about some of the best practices when engaging with some of these things and things you can ask for, things to look out for. And so let's talk about explosives and in gunfire and squibs and those things.
Yeah, well, with squibs, we're working hand in hand with the special effects department. And they actually will take the wardrobe and put the squibs in. In our case, the special effects coordinator will, along with myself, speak to the actor or actress to let them know exactly what the squib is, how it works, the safety precautions. For instance, if there's going to be a gunshot here in the front of your torso, you know, upon the action, not to look down because there is a possibility of it coming up into your face, but primarily it's supposed to shoot out. So those are some of the conversations that you have. You're, as a performer, you are have the total right to request either a stunt coordinator there if you feel there's something dangerous going to be happening, or to be doubled if you are involved in something and you don't feel comfortable doing it. So, you know, those are some of the rights that you have.
And we'll come back to that issue of when it's appropriate to ask for a double and things like that, because I think that is important. But Jim, you wanted to?
Let me just add that if a background actor is squibbed, it's in our contract that that individual is upgraded to a principal performer. It doesn't necessarily say stunt performer in the contract, it says principal performer, and we do look for a medic to be on the set whenever an actor or a stunt performer or anyone is squibbed.
I suppose it goes without saying, we might as well say it. Squib would be the explosive, mini explosive that would mimic a gunshot or some kind of wound or some kind of something that would mimic the impact. So what the upgrade to principal is not just you get a line, but you actually wear a squib in your wardrobe, and you are now it should get a principal contract. Yes. That's important. That's good. So what about? I remember Noah was shooting here not too long ago, and let's see, they chuckled. I think it's all familiar to folks. This idea of dynamic locations. Right, so you're up on the hillside somewhere, and it's not just some nice, bright, sunny day. They're pouring hundreds of gallons of water down the thing and creating mud and trying to create the most horrific natural disaster possible. How does one deal with that? I mean, whether you're a principal or you're a background performer or any of those, it can be extreme temperatures at night, middle of the summer.
Well, thankfully, I was working on another show at that time. But I did hear the horror stories, and on that one in particular, it didn't really matter how much you prepared. You were going to be wet, and you were going to, you know, break for lunch and go to the lunchroom, and you were going to remain wet. It wasn't like a situation where you could dry yourself off and then get dried up and ready to go for the second half of the day. It was, there's, you know, legions of stories about what people experienced there. The interesting thing that I did hear from some of the stunt performers were that they enjoyed it because they actually got to do a lot of work, got to actually do things. It wasn't a lot of standing around. It was fairly grueling. So, but I think in those types of situations, you sign on for something and you have to tough it out, and it's some conditions are worse than others.
I was going to say we had a field rep there virtually every night. J.J. Blitzstein did a terrific job, and he worked with the safety officer from Paramount, monitoring the winds and the temperature, and if the wind went over 15 miles an hour with those massive rain towers, and there were a lot of them, in the rain, they couldn't shoot. And if the temperature went below 40 degrees, despite everyone wearing a wetsuit, they couldn't shoot. And they had anywhere from 30 to 50 stunt performers every night. In the pre-production meeting, I was looking for more. The bigger the ratio, the better for everyone. So, you know, the field rep had to monitor what the background actors were doing, what they were being asked to do. Basically, the hordes poured out of the forest and came running toward the arc over the mud fields in the rain, and there was a huge battle scene. So there was a lot going on this set, and thankfully, everybody seemed to get through it.
There are safety limits for both cold and heat. Sometimes they're hard to enforce because OSHA doesn't have those rules, but those are standards of practice. And the good safety people, like the ones you had there, will look at that. And if you have a person who's soaking wet and it's 40 degrees and there's a wind, they're going to get chilled, and that is not acceptable. You do not have to kill yourself in order to make a movie. There are limits to what they can expect of you in terms of temperature, in terms of hours, in terms of heat, you know, all of those things. So make sure that there's someone there who's going to intervene for you if it gets really extreme.
And this was an extreme example, and I think it's a good one to me because there were certain things that people did know that they were getting into. And there were certain standards that it was like, well, both from the employment side and the management side said, you know, we reach these places where you're no longer safe. You're actually putting people at risk, and they'll shut it down until you get back to a place that you can do those things, even in an extreme circumstance. And, you know, this isn't just our members. I mean, you know, there's all the other folks on set who are having to deal with this thing as well. I mean, think about all the people that had to shoot this, all the people that had to build those rain towers, all those people that had to man those things. So it's a lot that goes into this sort of thing, but that's why there are contracts even above and beyond what our laws may provide for. When it comes to that was on location, but say you're on a set, a more traditional set, are there things that you could and should look for in terms of the environment that you're going to be in before you get working for the day? Are there things that you can ask about or you know, knock on the walls or kind of check things out? Are there things that people should be looking for when they show up before they actually roll cameras?
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting OSHA regulations that really should be thought about, and that is that you shouldn't come into any workplace without their giving you information about how to evacuate, how to use the fire extinguishers if they are there, what the plan is, if there's alarms, what they mean, where you meet to count noses afterwards. Those kinds of emergency procedures should be gone over somewhere. It's law, actually. I don't always see it. It doesn't always happen, but it should be done. So if they're not going to do it for you, you might want to find the exits. and find out what you're going to do if something goes wrong. That would be the first thing that you should probably know, is what to do in an emergency. There should be also posted emergency procedures on who you call, who you tell if there's an accident or a problem. So hopefully those things are covered right from the get-go.
So reality check time. How often does that stuff happen?
Well, I can tell you that on our show, at the beginning of the season, we, as a full production, we have a meeting with Los Angeles, with the head of safety from Warner Brothers. He gets involved. They also have a field rep of themselves that will come to New York from Los Angeles. He's there and in constant contact with us. When he gets the scripts, if he sees anything in it, he wants to understand how we're going about accomplishing that. He's speaking with the first AD, speaking with myself, speaking with the special effects, speaking with the unit production manager. So there's a lot of conversation that goes on prior to anything that we get involved with. And it's also on the call sheet that there's supposed to be safety meetings at every new location, and as well as in the studio. So when you come on, like she mentioned, the understanding where the exits are, knowing your surroundings and knowing where you are, and you know, your basic safety there.
Okay. Anything else that people would want to look out for other than, you know, escape exits and, you know, plan an emergency, other kinds of environmental things that people should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, but it would be not on the traditional set, but on location. Okay. Because one of the problems we have here in New York, and probably elsewhere, in fact, I know we have it in Boston because I've trained there too, is you can lease, if you're a producer, an abandoned building in New York from the mayor's office for $1. Now, if a property is abandoned in New York, there's probably a reason. And so we very often will find lead paint, asbestos, structural hazards, dead animals, pests. I mean, some of these are just thrilling places for us to work in. And so you really have to kind of look around. And if you see a pipe and there's stuff hanging off of it, pick up the phone. If you know, if the lead paint is beautiful on the wall, but it wasn't done by the scenic artists, it just happens to be hanging there, it's time to pick up the phone. And if you walk on the floor and it kind of bounces, there's a lot of things that we see in these places that are quite scary. And we don't usually hear about them until somebody picks up the phone, because we don't always know all of the places they're shooting in the office. So we really, at orientation, tell people, you know, let us know. As soon as you've got a job, let us know where it is. And if anything doesn't look right to you, give us a call. We'll check it out. If it's not a problem, good. We're still glad that we went there. We're not going to say, well, you didn't find anything terrible, so we're mad at you. You know, we're going to take a look at the place. So, and we keep in our union, all of the reports by address. So if they want to use an address over again, we already know some of the problems that are on that set. We see a lot of illegal electrical service and no plumbing. I mean, you're working in most places that have a certificate of occupancy. These places are abandoned, and it's something you really need to look around you.
You also need to stay on top of that, because there's a lot of locations where they'll want to shoot in one portion of the building, and they'll go in and then make a good faith effort to clean it up. And then the director comes in and goes, well, I don't want to shoot over there. I want to shoot down there, where nothing has been done. So, you know, you go in there in the first place and, okay, yeah, it's great, have a good shoot, and then you get a call 2 days later, well, we're not in that part of the building, we're in another part of the building. So you have to stay vigilant. I mean, this business is notorious for you know, you tell somebody you could shoot in any room in this building except that one. Don't go in that one. You know where they're going.
Yeah.
Jim?
And, you know, those rooms should be taped off limits. In our pre-production meetings, we always say, are you going to any environmentally challenged locations, any dangerous locations? Because we need to know up front so we could vet that. John mentioned earlier that the other unions, Local 52, 829, others who prepare the sets in some of these places like abandoned buildings, they're in way before we are. So, you know, we have our own committee of unions and we deal with these issues, and I'll get those reports in advance. But that doesn't always happen, and sometimes producers don't heed our advice, and we get frantic calls from members on set that there's an issue, and we send a field rep down there, and then they have to show us that the place is safe or not. We've had situations where a major studio production was notified in the pre-production meetings, let us know about these locations. They didn't do it, and the night before they were supposed to go into one of these buildings in Queens that are questionable, you know, the star did not want to do it, found out about it in the makeup chair the night before. And we went to Monona, we spent the whole night virtually dealing with this issue. And as a result, 3 days. We held our position on that. So we need this information up front. They need to share that with us so these locations are properly vetted and shown to be safe.
Yes, that's a really interesting problem that he mentioned, and there's been 2 of them now. When stars are breastfeeding or they're pregnant, they get very sensitive to going into really dangerous and dusty and lead paint and asbestos kinds of places. They will not do it. So if the producers don't do a good job, sometimes it isn't our job that we shut it down, but they will not go there. And without the star, there's no production. So they can be very influential in getting the right things done on a set.
Well, I think this is a great point to hit. I think that, you know, despite the fact that all the unions are talking to one another ahead of time, despite the fact that we will sit down with the employer before they go to work most of the time, sometimes it takes someone to say, I'm not going to go to work. Sometimes it's going to take other people, when you're not a star, to stand in solidarity with people. Because if somebody else is just going to go pick up that job that somebody else is going to let go and go do the thing that's unsafe, well, there's not a huge deterrent for the employer to not continue to do the thing. And when you've got, it's not just, excuse me, it's not just Los Angeles and the studio system in New York anymore. It's all over the country. You know, between Georgia and Louisiana leading production last year, the fact that I could shoot a feature film on the iPad I'm looking at the moment, the barriers to entry to this are so different. The employers are so different these days that it's not always dealing with labor relations from Warner Brothers or a major studio. You know, you're dealing with an entire spectrum of people who, I'd say more often than not, are interested in making sure that they send people to work safely. But they might not know how to do that. They might not understand what their obligations are. And every once in a while, you get somebody who actually just doesn't care into the mix. But they're all the different things that we can do ahead of time before you get there. But a lot of times, we need to hear from you. I mean, there's 165,000 SAG-AFTRA members that are there to be able to pick up the phone if we have not been given the information that we need.
At orientation, I just tell people, well, what you need to know also is I have a long theater background. I'm not just a chemist, industrial hygienist. I was AGVA by the time I was 3 years old, married into a vaudeville family. So I've seen it all. And and what I tell people at orientation is people who complain about safety to producers or to theater producers, they're called a name, and the name is unemployed, because they don't have to fire people, they just don't have to hire them again if they think that they're going to be difficult to deal with on this safety area. So that's why the unions are so important. If you're working non-union, you really have no leverage for safety, but the union will stand behind you, and we're not going to name who called. And with the New York production locals, if I show up there with John and our people, they don't know who called it in. It could have been a SAG member, it could have been a member of the Directors Guild, it could have been anybody on that set. So it's very important to be able to protect workers who want to have a safe set and are willing to stand up.
We've also been able to, it was mentioned how it's not just the studio system anymore. There's a lot of independent production. We're doing a lot of stuff now for the internet, and the non-studio projects, we negotiate agreements. We have standard agreements, but we write them. The unions write them. And we've been putting into these agreements over the last 6, 8 months, maybe a year, that we put a provision in the agreement that says the employer agrees to abide and adhere to all the studio, the AMPTP safety guidelines, and failure to do so is a material breach of the agreement, which makes this no strike clause null and void. So we can just shut the show down if they don't follow the agreements. But that's when agreements we write, not they write. But we're getting there.
Well, and that's exactly, and it's the way it should be. I mean, the way that these productions are going, I mean, these are $1 million budgets, $1 billion plus budgets in some instances. So this isn't, just a vanity project on somebody's credit card. A lot of times, this is real business where people, this often get theatrical distribution. We've got more distribution channels from Netflix and iTunes and Amazon, and so people are looking to fill those programming voids. And so there's all kinds of folks making content these days.
A lot of these independent producers, the way, you get a lot of people involved that have no history in the business. A lot of these contracts we write, there is no labor relations attorney. You got to hunt for them. It's a hired gun somewhere off in not the traditional avenues where you can pick up the phone if there's a problem. It takes a lot of work now to some of them. And that you got to. One of the reasons you got to be mindful, and you got to try to write these protections in, because eventually somebody's going to read it, the contract. You would think they would, but a lot of times they don't. But in any event, so they'll read that and they'll call us up. What does that mean? I said, what that means is you got to go on a website. You're going to download all of those safety bulletins, and you better read them, because if you violate one of them, you're going to have a problem.
We just went one step further than that in our contracts some years ago, and our line says that the producer will abide by all state, local, and federal health and safety regulations. So that means if we even see a health code violation, we can make it a contract issue. If we see a federal OSHA violation, we can make it an issue. So anything that is really against a law or a regulation for safety, we can step up and make an issue of that.
We have in our contracts that the performer's consent is a required prerequisite to the performance of any hazardous work or work under hazardous conditions. Also in the contract, it stipulates that producers shall not place performers in conditions that could be potentially dangerous, if at all possible. And then there is the OSHA regulations that Monona alludes to, and there's thousands of them, but there's one overriding one called the General Duty Clause. I'm sure Monona could elaborate on that more than me, but in general, it basically covers everything. I mean, all the technical jargon of every industry, this overarches everything and says, workers are, the employers must provide a safe workplace free of known hazards to their employees.
Yeah, the terminology is free of a recognized hazard. Well, dropping somebody from the rigging is a recognized hazard. Anything that is obviously a problem is clearly something that is dangerous. Even if there's no law at all, they can cite. And they do. Under the general duty clause, they cite for the types of flying accidents that we have, because that rigging doesn't conform to construction rigging. So they cite it under the general duty clause. So anytime you know that something's dangerous and the person says, well, there's no law, they don't understand there is a law. If it's a recognized hazard, you can't do it.
So that's what it says. So somebody's on set. Jim said the performer, you have to get prior consent for a hazardous job requirement or hazardous duty on set. Who gets to decide what that is in that moment? I'm on set. I don't like dogs. They want me to try to pull this thing away from this dog. I think it's hazardous. Set tells me it's a little tiny terrier and I need to get over it. Who decides whether or not it's hazardous in that situation or any other?
Well, with respect to animals, in our CBA, it does say what a reasonable person would deem to be hazardous with respect to working with an animal, unless there is a qualified animal handler or trainer on the set. So I mean, there's a lot of middle ground to this type of thing. If it's a bear you're working with or a chihuahua, I mean.
Well, Tim, can you give us you don't have to use names, and if you and please don't, I suppose, an instance that you can recall where there was a bit of contention about somebody wanted to call something hazardous and the other side said, no, that's not hazardous, you should probably go do that, and had to find a way to actually go to work, which is what everybody wants to do, which is to do the job and do it safely. Is there any example that you might be able to give us where that comes up, where this idea of I need to give consent for hazardous work and then actually kind of rubber meets the road?
Well, I can say that, you know, and oftentimes, and there's even some of the crew members who are on set, especially when we're dealing with weapons, things of that nature. It's not only performers, but crew members who are also exposed to this will question distances, will question, you know, where things are going to be going. When you're working with firearms, sometimes you have the shell casing projecting out. And so you have to cover all those issues, and with not only performers but even the crew members that are on set. So it does come up, and it's. I think one of the things that you can take away from all this is that the unions, the people who are involved in all the different guilds, a lot of the people on productions who are trying to do the right thing, have written a lot of rules. There's a lot of discussion, but at the end of the day, when you show up on set, you're your own CEO, and you're responsible for yourself. And you should be vigilant to know that a lot of things have been put into place, but there's always the human factor. And the human factor is mistakes are made, people forget, and so we all have to work together as far as that's concerned.
I think we should also turn it around, because sometimes there are people who want to do things they shouldn't do. It isn't only that the producer is asking people to do things that are dangerous. Sometimes the person who gets the job is just wagging their tail to do whatever the hell, even if it isn't safe, and hopes to get a good reputation as somebody who will do anything that they're asked to do. That's very career-ending, let me tell you, if you really have that philosophy, because sooner or later something's going to go wrong. You are the only instrument you have as an actor or a performer, and you take good care of it, because if you don't, it doesn't matter. No one's going to say, oh, wait, they were wonderful until they died. It isn't going to it isn't going to get you anywhere. So keeping your instrument in good shape is the important thing to think about.
Just an example of that, we have a show that's getting ready to go here in the city, and the employer actually called me last week and said, well, we're going to be going to this location, and there's some lead paint, so we're in a process of having it abated and whatnot. We're a little bit behind schedule, We had trouble with the lease or whatever it was, and so I said, okay, great. Do me a favor, give me a call when it's ready. And so, you know, I called my people on the show. They said, oh, okay. Well, when can we go there? And I said, well, maybe on Friday or so, but they're not sure about the schedule. Friday, I must have got 5 calls. Well, can we go in there? I said, well, did the employer tell you could go in there? They told us there was lead in there. Well, yeah, but we gotta get in there. Well, when the air is safe to breathe and everything's going in there. I got 5 phone calls this morning. Are they done? I got to get in there. I said, the employer hasn't told you anything? They're going to call you when it's safe. Well, yeah, but it shoots in 3 weeks. I got to go. And we actually had a guy go in there today. He went in there, and he was working. We had to call him up to get out of there. The report's not issued, but they just, you know, at the end of the day, they want to get the work done.
Sure.
And they understand that it shoots in 3 weeks, and if it takes an extra week, they're going to have to work 16-hour days. Right? They'd rather breathe in the lead paint than work the 16-hour days.
You know, preparation, like vigilance, as everyone's saying, and a clear understanding of what's expected at the time of hire is the way to go. And like Monona says, a lot of performers, they'll do anything almost to please the producer and get the job and maybe get an upgrade or whatever. But it's just I mean, what we look for on a set is who's doing the hazardous work. Is it stunt performers? How many stunt performers are there? And who's in that sort of perimeter of control, as it's called, you know? Are there any background actors? What are they being asked to do? And that's our focus. And is it something acceptable that they can do? Then they should get additional compensation. If not, then they shouldn't be there. Oftentimes, field reps in discussions, as the scene is being set up, will alter the course of that scene, sometimes out of safety concerns, but more often out of what it might cost the producer. You're looking at some upgrades over here. You're looking at significant adjustments, compensation adjustments, that type of thing. So the clear understanding of what the performer is going to do, and don't misrepresent what you can do. If you're asked to say, all right, we need you to be in the woods and running in the mud, and it's going to be cold, layer up, and then you get there and it's overwhelming for you. I mean, you kind of signed up for it as long as you're broken properly in heating tents and they do as much as they can to make it acceptable. It's something you signed up for. Not everybody should sign up for it if it's not for them. So,
I hate using this term, I suppose, but it's important. So who's the decider? Right, when you're on set, Tim, I'll keep picking on you. You say you're not doing coordinating. You're actually working as a stunt performer, and there's a coordinator there doing things, and you're a little iffy on something that you're being asked to do. Your first instinct is to talk to whom?
Well, if I'm there as a stunt performer, my immediate boss would be the stunt coordinator.
Okay.
And I could speak to him about something, and if it's something that is dealing with background performers, say, or it's a crowd scene, the stunt coordinator can go and discuss it with the first AD, because ultimately the director is trying to create something, and then the first AD then sets out to set the scene, putting people in certain positions. There might be stunt performers laced within that, and you're trying to create something. So it's a coordination and a cooperation with everyone there, so that they're hopefully listening to exactly what the action is going to be, what they're required to do, and there are many instances where someone is trying to get in, get their face in there, get seen, get possibly noticed, and yeah, it's something we're not too happy about when it does happen.
I'm sure it doesn't happen terribly often. So, good, I'm glad everybody got that one. You're the coordinator. Stunt performer comes to you. They're worried about something. You've been really pressured to try to make something happen. You're trying to do it the best you can. You're talking to the first AD. you're really not seeing eye to eye on this. At what point do you bring in a field rep? Do they come to you to talk about, hey, look, from the background's perspective, this is kind of what's going on? Sort of where's the stunt coordinator? Because it's an interesting role the stunt coordinator plays. It's that it's really unlike any other position within the union. You're a union member, you're an employee, you're not management, but you're also relied on to go find the talent, to go instruct the talent, to make sure they're all safe and that they can perform their duties. So the first AD is looking to you as sort of an ally and as a partner, because you have to be in order to execute the vision. So you sit in this middle ground in a way, primarily being a union member, of course, but kind of what, as a stunt coordinator, can you do, and what are the tools that you have to really ensure that everyone's safe in those instances?
Hire the right people. And, you know, what a good coordinator brings to the equation is knowledge of who is in the marketplace. And if you're going to be doing anything that's considered dangerous, you would like to bring the best person who can do that, whether it's a cannon flipping a car, whether it's a high fall, whether it's a fire gag, whether it's a rigger. You want to think of it as, if I'm going to be hanging off that building, who do I want rigging me if I had to be up there? And so that's the first order of business. Is you get the pages, you see exactly what you're going to be doing, and then there's like we've mentioned, there's a lot of discussion about it, but at the end of the day, when you have to do what you have to do, and many times there's time crunches, like you mentioned, and so that's why in our business we emphasize the training, we emphasize the knowledge, we emphasize the experience, and as much of that you can get prior to walking on set, the more valuable you'll be.
When a field rep shows up on set and sees someone like Tim or some of the other veteran stunt coordinators in New York on the set, right then and there we know, all right, things are covered here. And they're going to have their people in place. Like Tim said, it's one of the hardest jobs to break into, is to be a stunt performer in the regular mix, because they only rely on people who are excellent at what they do, because their reputation's at stake. And the field reps will have a discussion with the stunt coordinator. Okay, some scenes there will be background actors involved on the periphery. And all right, what is the line of demarcation? We'll go over that. And that's something we look for. The field rep is sort of the voice of reason. It's the only person on the set who's not collecting a paycheck from the producer. And to make sure that, and sometimes in the fog of getting the shot, we make sure that stunt players are doing stunt work, and background actors are not asked to do more than they're capable of doing. And when we see the right stunt coordinators in place, we know that's not going to happen.
They're talking about the majors and the way things are done when it's done right, but there are all of these smaller productions and all of these lesser people. And it's very difficult, because very often people are not qualified to do what they're doing. And there is arguments about what is right and what is wrong. And sometimes that's, again, why the union is important. I happen to be an employee that carries also a $2 million professional liability policy. I'm considered an authority on certain things so that I can end those arguments in some cases. This gentleman here could end them too, but you have to be careful with these smaller productions. We see people doing pyro who aren't even licensed sometimes in these situations. We see people who are doing stunts that they have no business trying to do. We see people rigging things that aren't safe. So you have to learn, the more you learn about all of the crafts, even the ones where you don't actually do it, but learn something about basic rigging. We teach even basic electrical stuff. There are certain types of equipment that you see them, you should know there's something wrong. There's certain kinds of wiring and other things that are really obvious. We want our people to know those things so that when they go on set and they see something isn't right, they can pick up the phone. So the more you learn, you could never learn everything there is to know, but just keep learning absolutely everything about the business. There's nothing you don't want to know.
It is. It's got to be one of the most, if not the most, sort of intensely and insanely collaborative, multifaceted endeavors that anybody ever gets into. That in any given moment, all of these pieces have to come together exactly right every time in order to even pull it off. And I think it's very important to not only our members but everybody else on set to understand what everybody else's role is, so that you can ask the question. And I guess I'm going to take us out of this for just a second, but I think you had said something that I think is very interesting about making sure to take care of your instrument. You know, this is what you have. How is it if I want to be safer, if I'm just getting into this business and I want to break into stunts, if I want to learn about what is appropriate rigging, if I want to know all of these things, how do I do it other than hanging around the people on set that know it? Are there places that you got your start, or places that other than the unions that people can go to get this kind of information? Meet these people?
It used to be a very loose, and pretty much you picked up things as you went along. Today it's gotten much more technical. We have people who are specializing now in fire. There's people who are that specialize in some of the rigging with the high-speed winches and things of that nature, which are are quite a lot of money to invest in. So and it's computerized, and it takes a lot of knowledge, and it's quite an investment, and you want to have people who know what they're doing. The way I came up, for instance, was that you didn't have an opportunity to do anything until you were around for a while and you witnessed it. You may have helped out. You may have been holding the dummy end and watched the expert work, and you work your way up. Today, there's a lot of work out there. There's a lot of venues. There's a lot of pipes that are sending the information out now that we have the internet, now that we have cable. So a lot of people are getting opportunities a lot sooner than I did. They're being put in positions that might be somewhere on the line of should I or shouldn't I? And I think that's for the individual to, you have to be able to answer that question, and you have to, if you're going to go to the driving schools and learn how to drive, if you're going to go take a seminar for rigging, do those things. If you're going to be involved with fire, find out who the fire guys are, and, ask questions, learn as much as you possibly can.
Oh. I had the pleasure of going through Local 52's rigging course back a while ago. So the unions also train. And the other group that I mentioned, PLASA, P-L-A-S-A, has an educational branch that provides training in arena and theater rigging, and actually will certify people as meeting the requirements of their courses. And they have people who are certified in other fields. So this is an educational program. You have to learn where this technical stuff is being taught and seek it out.
I think learning all the technical stuff would be terrific, and that's optimal to really know your way around a set, to navigate a set, and to make decisions. But the practical reality is, for many of you, that's not going to happen. So what I want to say is evaluate your situation on a set, particularly as Monona points out with these low-budget movies that are more apt to cut corners and place you in situations that you might not be ready for. When you see that developing and it doesn't feel right, that's when you call the union. You know, during work hours, you call directly to the local. If it's off hours, nights, weekends, holidays, call the number on the back of your card. There's 2 numbers. There's one for New York and one for Los Angeles. And this is a national emergency hotline. You will then be, the call will go through if it is an emergency and will be dealt with by your local representative in whatever local, wherever you're working, the closest local there. So that's something to keep in mind.
I'm on call 24/7, and my cell phone is on vibrate right now, just in case.
No emergencies? We're okay?
We're okay.
Okay,
here,
we're okay.
Yeah, but it's coming. Look out.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I echo that. I'm on call too.
Yeah, I left my cell phone in my bag. To add to this, from our end of things, beyond safety in terms of stunts and these kinds of things, the union also protects against sexual harassment and discrimination. And so that hotline number, what goes to an operator, and you describe the situation that's going on, and they'll find the right person, whether that's Jim or someone like, and who would then get in touch with somebody like Monona, or it could come to me or someone on my staff as well. So the number on the back of the card does go to a human being. It's good to remember that. Let's take this idea of different kinds of environments, studio, low budget, new media, and take a specific example of something that people have a question about and kind of play it out in these different scenarios. So a medic on set. When is that necessary? Does it matter in terms of the kinds of work that's being done? Is it the matter of number of people on set? Is it the budget that goes along with it? Whoever wants to jump in. John?
Well, Local 52 represents medics in a tri-state area. Now, that being said, and I find this very, very hard to believe and comprehend, and we've had them for probably 10 years, okay? But if you read the majors agreement, it's not mandatory that they be hired. Some companies will hire them right away for set and for shops. Other companies don't hire them at all unless there's a stunt of some kind or pyrotechnic. It really, truth be told, boggles my mind that a picture with a budget of $100 million or $50 million will not put a medic on a set in a shop that may have 75, 100 people, welding, people upstairs, forklifts going on, scissor lifts. Some do it, and some won't do it at all. It boggles my mind. If somebody gets hurt, you got to send him to the hospital. Right? The team's just got to take him to the hospital. He's got to go with a production assistant to the hospital, stay there in an emergency room for 10, 12, or 14 hours, right? When in reality, half the time, if there was a medic there, they would have fixed the problem, wrapped him or her up, whatever it may be, and down the road you go. But the resistance that I find with regards to medics being, and I mean, time after time we've made proposals to have them mandatory, and I get it that you don't want to have to pay for a medic if there's 4 people working on the corner or whatever, but you know, you put proposals in there for if there's more than 20 people working in a 50 people even. Put a medic in there, they won't do it.
So before Jim jumps in, and I guess we should have done this before, can you define what you mean by medic anyway, or sort of what we're talking about? Is it
well, I shouldn't say, and I should not say medic because one of the last contract we had, our first aid employee, which is what we call them now in the contract, and there was a legal reason why they shouldn't be called medics. They're there to provide first aid. But to get that language changed, you know, it's like you're trying to get world peace. Just change the language. We don't want to call them medics. We want to call them first aid employees. Well, why? Why? What's the difference? Like, what are you up to? Constantly. It took days and days and days. They finally relented, but they had to put in a contract. This does not infer that we're going to hire any more of them. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. One of the things that I've been in this business for going on 40 years. And like I said, they're not all like that. Some of them are very good. So you're going to open up a shop, the first person in through the door is the first aid employee, not the medic.
Okay, so
right?
first aid employee. And so you were talking about the majors. You're talking about the studios that you negotiate with.
Right.
So Jim, if I don't know if you were going to pick up on that as well, and maybe talk about, again, it's not just the majors anymore. I mean, there's a ton of work going on, especially in New York, that's not those folks. So talk us through some different scenarios when it comes to first aid, people who can provide first aid.
Well, I agree with everything John said, and we do have language in our contract that calls for, and it's very specifically worded. It doesn't use the term medic, doesn't use EMT or anything like that. It says a person qualified to administer medical assistance on an emergency basis during the performance of hazardous work or work under hazardous conditions. What does that mean? Essentially, it's an EMT or a paramedic. There are occasions where where they put an RN out there if it's like a minor scuffle and it might be a few scratches or something like that. So who knows why they have to word it this way? Maybe it's so they could get the nurse in there cheaper now and then. I don't know, but I do marvel at how often we still get into these battles about having a medic on a set. And just in the last year, I've probably had field reps on sets 6, 7 times with some stunt work going on. And often the stunt coordinators, he or she is busy, you know, setting and planning the stunt and getting everything along those lines, and thinks that the production manager's got his back until the field rep shows up and says, "Where's the medic?" Oh, and then I thought so and so, and then that's all what thought he was going to get it, or somebody else was going to get it. So there's no medic. We've had near-miss car crashes, and we actually made them get an ambulance, right? And the ambulance did show up with 2 EMTs right before that one. There was a squib scene, studio TV show, where we were told, and this was going to happen later in the evening, but the field rep was told, "We don't need a medic." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." And, there were calls to labor relations, and they actually argued the point with me. But as it turned out, they changed it, and the stunt coordinator was under the impression that there would not be a squib when he showed up. So, of course, he was on board with us. So we get into these battles. I was once on a set, and they were doing like elaborate car, this is years ago, 10 cars in a major near miss ending in a crash, and there was no medic, and I held them up for 2 hours till they got a medic down there with an ambulance. Another time there was a stair fall, and they got the medic, and then they went to my bosses to appeal that I was over the top. Somebody going down like 15 flights of stairs, a cement staircase outside, like head over heels. They didn't think a medic should be there. So, I'm giving you some of these examples that are extreme cases, but in the vast majority of the time, we have the medic on the set. And when there's an ambulance, we look for 2 people so somebody could drive the ambulance while someone is administering, first aid. So we look for 2. And I always tell the field reps, make sure you eyeball the medic. Never take anyone's word for it. Oh, well, he's down there. Yeah, right. So anyway.
And I can add that a few years back, there was a discussion, and I don't know if it's been resolved in paper or if it's been memorialized, but there was a question of when we have medics on set, especially when we're doing larger gags where there's fire involved, or like you said, going downstairs, car crashes, this, that, and the other, that the medic or EMT or paramedic, or whatever you want to call them, that they're trauma trained and that they have the ability to cut an airway, to do a tracheotomy on you, because in the essence of time, if you are in have a heavy trauma situation and they might not have time to get you to the hospital, you want to make sure that there's someone there who is trauma trained. And these are questions that you can ask. Sometimes they'll send an ambulance, but they're bus drivers, nothing more. They're not going to be able to save your life. They're only going to get you to the hospital, to the person that can save your life. So this is...
There is an OSHA regulation if the hospital is a certain number of minutes away that you have to have someone on site who can do something. I've never really thought about that regulation, but I'm certainly going to go back and take a look at it again because I have a feeling we may be able to use that.
So hopefully people are seeing a theme emerge here, which is the unions, in some cases state and local and federal laws, have really good protections in place on paper. And there's certain vagaries built into it, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of lawyers in a lot of instances, but sometimes they're a little overzealous when they try to protect their own interests. And so the language is up for interpretation. And one side may have a practice of it being one thing, and the other side has spent the last 20 years pushing against it. But those protections don't live on their own. People aren't often inclined to simply do everything that it could possibly mean and take every permutation and make sure they have that protection up front. They'll probably look to see if anybody asks the question. A lot of what's been said tonight has to do with, if you see something, say something. Ask the question. Is this safe? Is there a medic? You know, has there been a safety meeting? You know, do I have the right equipment? Is this okay? And a lot of the times, those things have actually been worked out, and there is an answer for you. But sometimes there isn't, and it needs to be worked out. So there's a lot of good protections built in, but it doesn't mean anything unless you identify your situation as lining up with what it is on that piece of paper and raising your hand to ask the question or picking up the phone and asking the question.
He's right, and all of these laws are wonderful, and all of the agencies that try to enforce them are pretty decent people. The problem is most of those agencies' budgets have been cut to the point that you're looking at OSHA being two guys in a garage somewhere. There aren't enough inspectors. The head of OSHA gave a press release a while ago, and he said that they have enough inspectors to visit every single workplace in the United States for 15 minutes once every 133 years. So it isn't going to happen. You're not going to see it. You can't wait for that to happen. OSHA will only show up usually after somebody's lying on the floor with their feet pointing up, and that's kind of like too late. So it's important that the unions can kind of step in and be in lieu of enforcement, because the laws are fine, but there really isn't going to be anybody there to enforce them.
So we're going to empower all of these people to call the union, to ask the question, to raise their hand. Part of this safety is also going to be safety of their careers moving forward. Are there protections for folks if they do say something? In whether they call a union, different shops may have different protections in their various contracts, but how can we assure people, whether it's the way we go about our business or certain protections that may be in our contracts, or there are certainly federal retaliation laws and state retaliation laws for these sorts of things, but you know, I think that we've encouraged a lot of people to do the right thing, and now we should make them feel somewhat secure about going about doing it. And Monona's shaking her head at me, so maybe that's not possible, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
There's OSHA whistleblower laws. Oh, don't count on them. Because in our business, no one has to fire you. They just don't rehire you for the next thing. So we really don't have much whistleblower protection. The unions will also step in if you've been unfairly treated or unfairly fired, but if the word gets out, that's the problem. They're not under an obligation to hire you for the next job. So it's a serious issue, and that's one of the reasons why we say if you know the producer and you know that when you bring up a safety problem, he's going to say, "Oh, goody, let's work on that." Well, then fine. But if you're not sure, again, pick up the phone. Let them yell at us. We like it.
So there you go. So it's going to be a lot about the way in which the unions go about doing this work. So can you talk a little bit about phone call comes in? I mean, you've related some anecdotes about things that you've been able to work on, but you know, maybe to reinforce the point about how it is that we go about doing this while protecting the individual.
I think a lot of it has to do with timing. Again, you know, with location work, even with the studio work, as you could find out about it, we can deal with it. The less issue there is with regards to retaliation, in my opinion, because there's time. When you have to tell an employer that now you can't shoot today, when you've got 300 people on the payroll waiting to go to work, right? Then that gets the blood boiling. But sometimes it can't be helped, but a lot of times, and we've had this with our own members to say, you know, where the crew will go into a location to shoot, and then somebody will say, well, there's lead paint down here. But we've had 30 people working in there for a month, right? So now the employer says, wait a second, we've had 30 people here in a month, nobody said anything, right? So sometimes it does get sticky, no doubt about it. But again, you know, the more you try to get this kind of notice in advance. Sometimes you have a problem on the stages. Just last week, got a phone call on such and such a show, and the stage, the fire lanes were blocked. So I sent somebody over there. I was there in 15 minutes, and sure enough, the fire lanes were clogged all the way around. The problem is that the production designers build these sets right up to the edge of the fire lane. Okay, but now you got 6 tractor-trailer loads of equipment that have to go in there. Where's it going to go? You know, so it's not always necessarily the employer's doing or their fault. Sometimes you fall into it. You got to clear the stuff out, put it out on the street. It's a hassle, but you know, you can resolve it. In that instance, it didn't really cost them any time. But a lot of times that was our own folks. Guys, look down at the floor. That's the fire lane. You can't put all your equipment here. You got to keep this clear. So on one hand, we're causing the problem, and on the other hand, we got to fix the problem. So, you know, you're not going to find a perfect solution all the time. But basically, the far in advance we know, the less reason where there is and it could be anybody. You know, it's hundreds of people. So they're not really, I don't know that they're really interested in who actually made the call, if we can fix the problem in a timely manner.
And we encourage producers to notify us in advance so we can work on these problems with them when there is a big, dangerous scene, maybe involving not only stunt performers but background actors, or a dangerous location. Let's get everything straightened out beforehand. That doesn't always happen. We get call sheets the night before. We're on the automatic distribution list, and you know, we look at those and try. The trick for me is to try to have a field rep on set during the areas of concern when they're being shot. If there's a battle scene that's scheduled for later in the day, we'll have a field rep ready to go. Field reps work, you know, nights, weekends, even holidays. So that is key, to get a field rep on the set. But we also, producers don't always want to deal with us beforehand. So if you're working on a set and you know there's a big scene coming up, or there is something particularly concerning to you, call us and we will be there. And we will deal with it in advance. We'll just say, you know, we heard about this. Everything's confidential, but give us advance notification from your end so we could deal with it.
The ideal situation is when John and I, and usually Beverly Miller from 829, are called ahead of time by the location scouts. And we actually go and look at the locations that they're thinking of leasing or renting or whatever. So we can actually tell them ahead of time, well, if you use this one, here's the problems here. If you use this one, we're going to have to fix this, and so on. And that's the really ideal way, because then they can actually budget for it in terms of both money and time, and we can get the problems caught right at the beginning.
So I'm looking at some questions that have come in from the audience and also from Twitter, and I'm just going to hit these right now, and we'll get to some of them in a minute, because they're about this topic. They're about this thing about fear of loss of work prevents people from saying anything. Is there some anonymous contact number or site that people can use? I want to make sure that we have this clear. If you're working somewhere and there's some, say you're working, your background, they ask you to do a stunt and you want to get an upgrade, or you have to wear a squib and you look to get a principal contract, or something happens to you as an individual, clearly there's no way for the union to go about fixing that for you without it being about you as an individual, because it directly affects you. But the things that we're talking about right now, the see something, say something, pick up the phone, call the hotline, call your local shop. If it's about the workplace, if it's about the working conditions, there's no reason we would ever tell these folks who it is that called us, right? Is that, do I have that right? That it is, whether it's the back of the card or you call which union or the other union, your union will keep your identity so long as it doesn't have to do with you and as an individual. Say you got hurt specifically, or you need some sort of contract upgrade. If it's just about what's going on and they want to let us know, they don't even necessarily have to tell us who they are, right? They could just call us up, say, I'm working on this set, this is what I think is going on, can you go find out about it?
Not even bamboo under the fingernails will get that name.
Okay, so there you go. I think that's important to make sure people understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Confidentiality, and when something's happening on a set that affects everyone, it all takes is one phone call to us, But sometimes, things happen fast on a set, and there might be, 80 background actors, and suddenly they're facing what is perceived to be a potentially dangerous situation. Sure, call us, and we'll get right on that as soon as possible. But if immediate action is necessary, solidarity is the way to go. If everybody is involved, speak to the first AD as a group, to the stunt coordinator. These are the people responsible for the safety on the set. The first AD, the stunt coordinator, solidarity with cast and crew and background, looking out for each other. That's the way to go to solve problems in immediacy. But definitely call us, and confidentiality, as we know, is always protected.
One thing I'd like to bring up also, we're talking a lot about on set, but I'd also like to talk a little bit about in the audition room. And something that occurred in the last commercials contract that some of you might not be aware of was that we were put into the contract that if you go into audition for a commercial and they are asking you to do some stunts in the room, which happens quite often, you're entitled to have a stunt coordinator there in the audition room to assist you. I can tell you a little story that I got a phone call, this is years back, where I was called by a production company, can you come in and help us with a audition? And I went in, and they were tackling guys in front of camera, and this director was not a nice person, and he was looking for real hits in the audition room. We weren't even shooting yet, and so I protected the people accordingly, brought pads in, and did the best I could to protect the people. And a lot of these people weren't going to make the commercial. They were just going to be in the audition room, and they were only going to select a few people. So the next day we went to set to shoot, and there's this guy that comes to visit set, and he's got a sling on. And I got into a conversation with him, and he was he had auditioned the day before I got called down there to be in the audition room. So this director had actually hurt someone, and the guy showed up, and he just, I don't even know if he knew what his rights were as far as compensation or anything of that nature. But now at least actors have a tool when you go into the audition room, and this is all in the commercials contract as far as the other contract is concerned, not in that provision. But I think that when you go into an audition and they are asking you to do something that you feel uncomfortable with, I would say no, because there's no guarantee you sell out for them in that audition that you're going to get hired. And you may be going home very sore, and all because someone doesn't have the vision to be able to see what's going to occur on set.
I kind of wonder how many performers and actors and people who are in our business in the technical unions, how many really understand that you can't sue your employer, even if your employer puts you in harm's way. That's what workers' compensation was granted in lieu of. When we got workers' compensation, your right to sue the employer for the injury that you get or the illness that you get on during work is gone. I know of a dancer who was injured, and he slipped on a stage that was not properly maintained, and when he hit his head, he was damaged so that he no longer had balance control. So his career was over in that one fall. He was working in New York. He was an internationally known dancer. And he ended up with, that was a few years ago, $400 a week full New York disability. Now, you can't live on it. They've raised it to $600, but you have to understand that if they hurt you, you're done. You can't just say, well, they put me in harm's way, now they're going to pay. They're not going to. And the employer only has his insurance rates go up a little bit. He doesn't pay the $400 or the $600 a week. So it is not to, sometimes it's cheaper to kill you. So you need to understand that. You need to be aware that protecting yourself is your job.
That is an awesome transition into into what happens, because we've been talking a lot about how do you equip yourself the best you can to make sure you aren't hurt. That you know what you need to know, that you don't put yourself in harm's way, that you ask the question and you speak up before it gets there. Stuff happens. Even as prepared as you possibly could be, people get hurt. People die. If you're hurt on set, what do? You talked a little bit about workers' compensation. I don't know who wants to take this, but I get hurt on set. Who do I call? What do I do? What's my next step?
Well, the first thing they're going to ask you at the hospital is this related to an accident? That's always on that blank that you fill out when you go to a new doctor or admitted for any reason. And if it is an accident, everybody in the hospital says, oh, God, we're never going to get paid, because now it goes through workers' compensation, and it might even be, if it's a car accident, it may have a lawsuit or something involved. Otherwise...
I'm sorry, you mean an accident at work?
An accident at work is still workers' compensation, and now it goes through a different part of the medical thing. Your health insurance is not supposed to pay for accidents at work. It's supposed to be under workers' compensation. So all of a sudden, your ordinary health insurance is not what is going to rule how that gets paid and how that gets done.
I think that if you are on set and if they have been kind enough to provide a medic, you sustain an injury, however it may have occurred by accident, by what was going on with production. See the medic. If there is no medic, see the AD department, the assistant directors, They will have forms for you to fill out so that there's an accident report and you have it documented so that when you do need to go get workers' compensation, when you do need to go see a doctor, then you have that documentation trail throughout however long it takes to get healed.
Let me just add that no matter how small of an injury you sustain on a set, if you know, seek out medical attention if necessary, but also make the AD department aware of it, so they will generate an accident report. The accident report goes to the union, and there is a record of this. I've seen performers sustain what at the time seemed like a minor injury. I remember one background actor was doing some car work, you know, they were driving on the Henry Hudson Parkway, you know, and during one break, he's walking and somebody opens the door and he hit his knee, and, you know, and didn't seem like a big deal, but it did develop into a problem. He had to have surgery, and he wound up getting workers' compensation for that. That's the key I want to point out here. And also, there's a statute of limitations for applying for workers' comp. I believe it's 30 days in New York State. There are some exceptions if symptoms develop later for you that you could try for as well. But always put in for the accident report any kind of injury, seek medical attention, and get all the forms for workers' comp if necessary, and keep aware of the time limitation.
Make sure that you keep, and you got to do this yourself, keep good records. Make copies of every form that you have to fill out, every form that you fill out at the doctor's, depending on what the injury is. It could drag on for years and years. Could be dozens of different doctors, okay? Keep good records. Don't fill out a form, well, I mailed it in, okay? You got to keep good records of all that stuff. It could drag on forever, and any excuse that somebody has to throw a roadblock in there because they didn't get this form, it just makes it worse. So take that upon yourself. Always keep good records. And as Jim said, always report it, really, no matter how minor, because it may seem like nothing now, and then in 2 weeks or whatever it may be, you could be on a different job still working. Now all of a sudden you can't, you got a problem. Always, no matter how small it is, get it documented on record and keep those forms where you can get at them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, in any work that anybody does in this country, clearly you need your healthy self to be able to perform the duties of your job, but even more so as a performer, this is all you've got. You got to be able to bring your A game with everything you have, and if you think that something's not that big of a deal, it could develop into something later. If you don't have the documentation at the time, you're not going to be able to file for the workers' compensation. And in terms of documentation, there's no excuse anymore with smartphones. I mean, you can take a picture of every form of where you were when it happened, all those kinds of things. So take advantage of those kinds of things so you can really keep the best records possible.
Just one last thing. Also, to be aware, at least on my end of it, the payroll company is the employer of record for workers' compensation and unemployment, not Paramount or Warner Brothers, whomever. For us, it's the payroll company. That information is on the pay stubs, but for us anyway, it's they're the employer of record, not the studios.
And it's a similar case for oftentimes for say background or their studios will employ payroll companies and things like that who will have that insurance, and all of that kind of information as to who the employer of record is depending on your job that you've got. All of that can be found with the union in our production records and the call sheets and the things that we have. I'm going to get to some of these other questions here, and then I'm going to have the panelists think as I ask these questions about any final takeaways beyond the, I think, beating folks over the head with if you see something, say something. Thank you, Mayor Mike Bloomberg, for that. I think we'll always remember that one. And also to remember that when you talk to your union, you're talking to your union, and that's it. But if there are any other final messages that you'd have for people, I'd like you to start thinking about that now. As we get into some, I couldn't figure out a clever way to interweave these questions into what we were talking about because they're fairly specific. But I do think that they'd be applicable to folks in the room and not just to the individuals who ask them. But what are the requirements, or are there requirements when it comes to having a coordinator when doing stunts? And does it matter what contract that I'm working under? So if I want to do a stunt in my low budget or my new media thing, can I just have somebody perform the stunt and I, as the director or first AD, can have them do it? Or is there some kind of requirement for a coordinator to actually do that coordination?
We have a language in our contract that it very specifically does state that an individual qualified by training and or experience in the planning, setting up, and or performance of this type of stunt involved must be present, engaged and present on the set at the time of the performance. So it's very clear that is a stunt coordinator. They don't actually use the term, but that is a stunt coordinator. So that's one thing everyone should look for. When they are doing stunts or stunt-related work, there should be a stunt coordinator on the set.
Okay, so yes. Okay. In all instances, yes. So if you're going to do the work. And this isn't specific to these kinds of stunt or activity. This is more of sort of an environment kind of a thing. And I think oftentimes in places like New York or outside any studio system, frankly, are there any requirements when it that have to do with getting people back to where they started in a safe location? So you're working at till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and they just say, "Okay, see you guys later. We'll see you tomorrow." Do they have to do better than that? In what instances do they have to return them to some place that is agreed upon as a safe location?
Well, for SAG-AFTRA, we do have the after 9:30 night transportation rule. Unless they're shooting in a very tiny zone, 57th and 34th, 3rd and 8th Avenue. If you're in that zone, they could wrap you after 9:30 or on your own. Anywhere else, they are required to take, whether they're inside the 8-mile zone for background or outside of it, the 25-mile zone for principals, inside or out, they have to take you back to the original pickup spot and then go on to one of the safe zones, which is Penn Station, Port Authority, or Grand Central, at their choice.
Do we have those kinds of rules that outside of New York?
They have different zones. Most of them have like a 30-mile zone. The only one would be Los Angeles. I think they have something in place along those lines there, yes.
Okay. Tim, do you want to speak that? I saw you. No, good, okay. And we talked about sort of these...
Oh, excuse me, I meant the western zones for background, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and there's other western zones as well.
Thank you, Jim. Is there anywhere, and this was you talked about at the beginning, to don't trust that these things are going to be on set for you in terms of guidelines and safety things, and is there either a person or is there someplace once you're there, and maybe you had to leave your cell phone and holding, and you can't look it up online, and you can't really get at it once you're there? Is there a person on production or if on our end of things that people can find that stuff out? For example, when we talked about NOAA, that they had decided, okay, a certain mile-an-hour wind, certain temperature, and that's the threshold. If I get to set and I haven't figured that out before I get there, how can I find out when I'm there?
Well, I mean, the person to go to would be the first AD or the stunt coordinator, and they're in charge of that kind of stuff. There might be a safety officer present from a studio, but whatever the concerns are with respect to one's well-being and where you might be placed, you start the ball rolling with them. And if it affects many performers, approach them as a group if you can, and this way everyone is involved, and they're not going to drop a dime to casting on 30 people.
Okay. And we'll just to give the cameraman a break, we'll start with Tim for final thoughts, and we'll work our way back this way.
Have fun while you're out there. I think we've gone over quite a bit about the fact that these things have all been discussed. There's a lot on paper, but at the end of the day, be vigilant, be responsible, ask questions, just go into your surrounding with your eyes open.
I think in light of the tragedy of Georgia, there's the heightened awareness of safety across the country on sets continues, and it will continue. And I think if anything good comes out of this, people will speak up more when they're on set and they don't feel something is right and their safety is jeopardized. Just remember that, you know, if you have a right to ask questions. You have a right to know your workplace is safe. You have a right to know that anything that you're being asked to inhale, ingest, or touch, you need to know what that is. They are, according to our contracts and by OSHA, they must provide you with the data on these products. You know, just you're in charge, and stick together with the crew. Call us when necessary, and we'll be there for you.
Yeah, you know, this is really, without a doubt, the most chaotic and insane industry that there is on the planet. I mean, really, it's every day it's controlled chaos for the most part. Sometimes you lose control, and that's when bad things happen. So again, it's the same thing. Keep your eyes open. One thing I did want to say, to me, one of the biggest dangers, and it's present every single day, that nobody ever talks about really, is fatigue, right? Especially you go to work on an episodic TV show, that's, that's 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, 5 and 6 days a week for 4 or 5 or 6 months, you know. We're trying to get better at it. Some shows are a lot better than others, but that's another one now, too, is you really got to be mindful. If the employer's providing you transportation, that's fine. My folks live all over the place, so as a rule, they drive. And so that's really a big issue. In my mind, that's the biggest issue. The other stuff, yeah, we can do the best we can, and a lot of that we can control ourselves. But the hours that you work, unfortunately, you know, and listen, it's the business we all chose to get in, but everybody please be mindful of that. And hopefully, you know, especially if you're going to turn into big directors and producers and production managers, just be mindful of how you treat everyone. And somebody made a comment a few weeks ago, and really just be mindful of and have respect for everybody that's on the set. Right? We work long hours, we get on each other's nerves, we step on each other's toes, but at the end of the day, you know, everybody just get home safe, that's all.
It's difficult to know who to trust. And the one person you can trust is yourself. And the more you learn, the more you don't have to believe the producer when he says you can do this or you can do that or you don't need this. So never stop learning. This is the new school. It means you keep on educating yourself. And there is nothing about the business that you don't want to know. Just talk to everybody, learn all the time, read all the time. Get as much as you can, because every single thing that you know is going to come in someday, somewhere, to make this clearer to you. And take care of yourself, because you're all you got.
That's fantastic. Well, I just want to, we'll hold the applause for the online audience so we don't blow their ears out until I go all the way down the line. But I think that it's been an incredible conversation between Monona, John, Jim, and Tim. Their information is online. Find us if you need. Thank to the SAG Foundation. Thank you to the New School. Thank you all for being here. We can all clap now. Break a leg out to everybody.
Class dismissed?
Class dismissed. Yes, good. Thanks, John.